In this video, we're going to be taking a look at AIOHTTP. Now, this is a client and server-side Python library that lets us create asynchronous requests. Now, this is particularly useful and important to us when we're web scraping because it means that we can basically get data from multiple web pages at the same time. In general synchronous web scrapers, like when we use the request and beautiful soup libraries together, we have to wait for the response from the server before we can pass that data. This basically leaves a lot of time left in our code where it's sat there just doing nothing, waiting for a response from an external server. When we create these requests asynchronously with something like AIOHTTP, we can greatly increase the speed of which we can scrape. It's also very common nowadays in Python in web apps. So it's definitely worth trying to learn and get your head around how it works, and AIOHTTP is a good place to start. So let's jump on the computer and we will start running through how you can create a simple request, how to then request for multiple URLs, and I'll try to do my best to explain how everything as we go along. So if you're enjoying this video, guys, or if you get anything out of it, please drop me a like and consider subscribing as well. Let's get started. So if you haven't done already, you need to pip install AIOHTTP. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over to the documentation here, and it's telling us how we can quick start and how we can actually make a request. Now, I know this looks like a little bit more complicated than basically just a simple requests r equals request.get, but we're doing a little bit more stuff here. And if actually you're interested in that, if you come over to this page, which I'll link down below, and come to the AIOHTTP request lifecycle, it explains a little bit more about why there's more to it and how it's different to creating it against the actual requests library itself. So this is interesting if you wanted to find out a bit more information here. But what we're going to do is we're going to copy this part of the code first, and we're going to run through this and see what we get out. And then I'm going to show you how to actually use it in a more of a practical web scraper type thing. So I'm going to import AIOHTTP and also import asyncio, which is the Python asynchronous library, which we do need. I'm going to go ahead and paste this code here. Now what this is basically saying that we need to create a coroutine, and these are like the awaitables, which is the functions that we write that are asynchronous. So this is one of them here. So we define that by saying we have our same define, but we have async in front of it, and you can see that we have async in front of these other ones too, and then the await at the end. So what this second line here, this first line is just defining our function. The second line is basically with AIOHTTP client session. Now this is a context manager. So what we're doing here, it's like when you open up a file in your code, you might open up a CSV file, something you use the with, which is the context manager. So we're using that here, and the client session is basically a session object. I've got a video on session objects already if you don't know much about them, and I'll put that down there somewhere you can find it. So what we're saying is we're going to use the session to get the data from this website. We're going to store it in RESP. I normally use R, but this is this example. This is the status code, and then the text of the response. Now the next thing that's important is this down here, which is the loop. So we're creating the event loop. This is basically what runs all the tasks and controls everything and all the sub processes. So generally you don't really need to reference the loop, but they've left it in their example. So I'm going to leave it in here, and we're going to run this code now. So what this is going to do is going to send a request to the server, and you can see that we have got some information back here. It's JSON response, which is good. So now that we sort of see that this can work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this code here, and we're going to create something that looks a little bit more like what we would expect. So again, I'm going to do async def, and I'm going to call this one get page, and we're going to say that we need the session and a URL. So basically what we're going to need is we're going to need three main async functions. The first one is going to be the one that we use to just get the data off the page. The second one is going to be the one where we put all the tasks together, and then the third one is going to be the main function that controls everything, and basically the one that we give all the URLs to. So this is the one that's just going to get the data off the page. So it's going to look very similar to what I just removed. So I'm going to say with async with session, which is what we're going to give it, .get the URL, and we're going to say as r, and we're going to return, and here's our await keyword for our coroutine, and we're going to just return our.text because we're going to want the text HTML off of this page. So that's basically just creating the simple request for the data off that page. The next thing that we want to do is we're going to create another function, and we're going to do async def again, because this is also asynchronous. And we're going to call this one, we'll just call it get all. I'm not particularly great with my function names. Make sure you name your function as well and know what you're talking and know what you're doing. And again, we're going to give it session, and we also want to give it our URLs list. This is the one that is going to create the tasks for everything, for all the coroutines to go into the loop and bring all that data back. So we're going to say URLs because we're going to make a URLs list. And then under here, we're going to say, here's our tasks that we want to return. So we want to create a list of tasks, and then we can do for URL in URLs. So now we want to do task is equal to async io dot create task. Now the task that we want to create is this one. This is the task that we want to create. We want to create a task for each URL in our URLs list, which we're still yet to create, to go and get the page data from there. So what we want to do is we want to reference this function here inside this one. So we can say we want to get the page with the session and the URL, and then we can do task.append. So we create our list of tasks. Sorry, there we go. So basically, this part of the code is saying we're going to create a task, and each individual task, again, coroutine controlled by the event loop, creating that task for our function here. And we're saying that the session and the URL. So the URL is one of each of the URLs. And again, the session and the URL object we're going to pass in at the end. We're going to add those in. So I'm still just sort of structuring my code out at the moment. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to come outside of our thing, outside of our for loop. I'm just going to say our results is equal to, again, here's our await. So we can await this function, and async io.gather and the tasks like this. And then I'm just going to return the results out of this function. Here we are basically saying our results is we're gathering all the tasks together, and we need to use an asterisk here because this is a positional argument, and we want to unpack our iterable, which is our task list. So, and then we're returning all the results out of this function. Now we can write our final function, so we can sort of put everything together. So this is going to be our main function. So again, we want to do async def, and this is our main. This is the one we're going to give our URLs list to. So now we can do async with, and we want to have our session in here. So I'm going to do AIOHTTP client as session. And now we can just do, let's just say data is equal to await, and we want to do our get all function, and let's say our session and URLs. And we want to return our data out of here. So what this one's doing is this one's creating our session, and we're saying with our session, saving all of the information that comes back into this variable, let's get all of this. So basically, it's kind of like this one's inside here and this one's inside here. And this is going to basically let us do everything that we want in one go. So the last thing I'm going to do before we get some data back is I'm just going to do our, let's just do if name is equal to and main. So this runs here, and we'll do, we need a URLs list. So let's create that here. So what I'm going to do is just grab some of the test site URLs here, and we'll just put that one in there. 1, page 2, and page 3. Let's do that. And the final piece of the puzzle, we want to run everything. So I'm going to do results is equal to async io.run. As I said earlier, we let this manage the event loop for us, so we don't need to do anything with it. And I'm going to say main, and we just need to give it our URLs list. And then I'm going to print, we'll just print the length of the results now, because it should return a list. And if I print all the data, it'll just be a bit of a mess, as you'll see. 3, okay, so now we'll print the actual data from the results, and this should be all of the HTML code back. We won't know, there we go, we can see it all. So loads of information. So basically what we've done is we've created 3 async functions, one which gets the HTML off the page, one which creates all the tasks for all the pages, and then one that runs everything and controls the session. So now that we've actually get our HTML back, what we can do is we can just parse that HTML all separately, because HTML parsing is CPU intensive and most of us have good computers these days, so that doesn't take long. In web scraping, the time lost is always in waiting for the response from the server, generally speaking. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write a real quick non-async function at the end. I'm just going to call this parse, and we're going to give it some data, and we're just going to print that out here. So let's just call this parse our results, and let's do for HTML in results. And because I showed you earlier that we actually got a list back for each one of the pages, we need to loop through that list. So now we can just do soup is equal to beautiful soup, and let's say it was HTML, and then we can just do print soup dot find. And if I come to the page here, if we just print out, let's just print this little bit out here, so we can easily see that we have actually got different bits of data back. This is, I believe, it's under here. It's under a form and the class of form-horizontal. I'm not sure why that doesn't look like a form to me. It doesn't matter. So let's do form, and then put our class inside our dictionary, .horizontal, and let's get the .text. And let's strip any white space that may come off of that as well. So now we can print the parse of our results like this. In fact, we don't need the print here because we've got a print statement in here. I'll just end this function with return here. There we go. So now if I run this, we should see some actual data, except let's kill this terminal. And we've got back some information here. Now this is because I didn't specify what parser I wanted in my beautiful soup, but you can see this is the information that I've scraped: 1 to 20, 21 to 40, 41 to 60. So where would you want to go from here if you were actually going to use this as a proper web scraper? Well, what I would suggest is you first get all the links together off your page. So if you think that you're going to be doing multiple pages from a website, then you could get the links first. So you could scrape the pages and get the links, and then create your URLs list that way, and then go in asynchronously to each product page, for example, and pull that data back out, then parse it. So just to recap, we need to import AIOHTTP and asyncio because it's the async library in Python. We create our 3 async functions that kind of nest into each other. We're using tasks that we gather together with asyncio gather. And then we use the coroutine async and await keywords to make everything run neatly inside the event loop, of which we let the Python code use and look after by just doing asyncio.run. So that's it, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and got something out of it. I've done my best to explain async and await in a request format that might be helpful to you. So let me know how you think I got on down below, and yeah, stick around for some more videos coming up. Loads of web scraping content on my channel already. So like, subscribe, comment. Thank you very much, guys. Goodbye.